Hey guys, today we're reading Loni's Town, written by Anne Rossi and illustrated by Jeff Hopkins. So, who is the illustrator? An illustrator is the person who draws the pictures. In this case, it looks like he might have painted them. All right, so Loni's Town. Here are some of the vocabulary words that you saw as part of your flashcards where you studied. Take a look at that. Horse-drawn carriage. Okay, so the first step I'd like you to do is I'd like you to read this page, and then I'll read it to you. So you're going to pause the video now so that you can read this page. Loni loved her town. She spent time walking and shopping with her grandma. They bought bread at the bakery and shoes at the shoe store. Here's Loni. Okay, please read this page now. Pause so that you can do that. From their apartment window, Loni and her grandma watched people walk and jog along the busy street. At the crosswalk, a guide dog was helping its owner cross the street. "Grandma, I love living here. I hope our town will never change," said Loni. Now, as they were walking, they noticed a guide dog helping someone cross the street. Do you know why that person needs a guide dog? So there are many different reasons why someone might have a dog that's helping them cross the street. In this case, many times a guide dog is used for someone who is blind. And the dog is able to navigate cars and traffic and is able to help the person who is blind to navigate the town. So that's probably what's going on over here. And then, let me see, was there something else? Well, it's kind of interesting because it looks like Loni lives with her grandma. That's an interesting family. All families are wonderful. Okay, please read this page. Make sure you pause. "We have a great town, Loni," smiled Grandma. "But did you know that in the past there were only farms here? It looked very different when my great-grandmother was a little girl. I'll get some pictures to show you." Huh, so this town looked like this in the past. I wonder what it'll look like in the future. Okay, please read this page. Grandma showed Loni a picture of a young girl. She was standing next to a house and barn. A cow was sticking its head out of a window in the barn. Behind the girl, a field of corn stretched down to the river. Please read this page. "Wow, I never knew our town used to be farmland," exclaimed Loni as she pointed to the photo album. "Oh my, yes," said Grandma. "My great-grandmother's family farm had cows, sheep, goats, and goats for milk." Okay, please read this page. "They kept chickens too," continued Grandma, "but not for milk." Loni giggled. "There's no such thing as chicken milk, Grandma. Look, your great-grandma is gathering chicken eggs in this picture." Please read this page. Grandma explained that even transportation was different back then. Her great-grandmother's family traveled by boat, by horse, or on foot. There were dirt roads in the town. "What happened to all the farms and the dirt roads?" asked Loni. Do you know what happened to them? Please read this page. More people settled here, and over time, farmers sold their land to builders. They built stores and schools. They paved the roads. It was a town when my grandmother was born. People moved there to find jobs, said Grandma. This picture shows how different the town looked back then. Grandma handed Loni another picture. Oh, please read this page. When my mother was born, cars and horses shared the road. Years later, when I was born, you never saw a horse on the street. Our town has changed a lot, said Loni thoughtfully. I bet it will keep growing and changing, just like me. Okay. So this part is a nonfiction aspect of the story, and you can see here this is a real photograph. This is the city of St. Louis, which lies along the Mississippi River. Rivers have helped towns grow for hundreds of years. Rivers are excellent routes for transportation. Many settlers followed rivers to find new places to live. The land around a river was often good for growing crops. Rivers are a good source of water for animals and people. Many settlements in the United States were built along rivers. Over time, these settlements grew into the large cities of the present. St. Louis, Missouri is a city that is near the Mississippi River. Okay, so now you need this page. Okay, and so you should pause me now so that you can get this page out. Okay, so on this page, we are going to be thinking about the characters in the story. So the characters are generally people, they can sometimes be animals, and they play an important role in telling the story. We will also be thinking about the setting, which is where and when the story happens. So for instance, the setting to this story happens in the town, which is a little bit more like a city. But if we thought about the story of the Three Little Pigs, that takes place on a farm. And if we think about a story about aliens, that takes place in outer space. And if we think about the Little Mermaid, that takes place under the water. Each of those are a different setting. What I'd like you to do is to listen to me read the question. Then I'd like you to fill in your answer with a complete sentence using a capital and a period. So how do you do that? Well, one of the ways that you can do that, I'll show you now, is you read, "What does Grandma think about the town?" And you think to yourself, I don't really remember. Well, you can go back through this video and find where we spoke about Grandma. So for instance, on page 5, Grandma says this. She says, "We have a great town, Loni," smiled Grandma. So she thinks the town is great. So how do I complete the sentence? Well, I need to say who. Who is who? Grandma. And the question is what she thinks the town, notice the spaces in between my words, is, and then what word did they use in the story? Great. Notice the capital, notice the period. Notice that I put spaces in between my words and I use the question in order to answer it. Okay, so number 2, how does Grandma feel when she shows pictures to Loni? I'd like you to pause me now and go back to the story and answer this question. How does Grandma feel when she shows pictures to Loni? I would think, so again, we're speaking about the character Grandma. How does she feel? Well, she feels, so I'm going to teach you a new word. So this is the word that Mrs. Smith would have used. Nostalgic. That's a good word. So nostalgic. That means that it's a time when you remember. So she is feeling, and having her memories of the town come back to her when she shows Loni the pictures. Grandma feels nostalgic when she shows Loni. Okay, number 3, how does Grandma feel at the end of the story? Please pause me now, go back in the video, and find the end of the story. I believe, and this is the tricky part because they didn't really say it in there, but if I look at Grandma's face and how she's telling Loni that things have changed. Even though they've changed, it's still a wonderful town. I believe we can say, again, we're speaking about Grandma. How does she feel? Grandma feels the town will grow and be great, because she has seen that that the town, even though it has changed since the time that her great grandma was there, and her grandma, and now her grandchild, it still is a really great town, similar to Benicia, really. I don't know how many of you have your grandparents that that grew up in Benicia, or maybe even great grandparents that grew up in Benicia, or maybe Vallejo, American Canyon, Sassoon, Fairfield, Vacaville, any of those places. Okay. Number 4, what is Loni's town like today? So go back to the part of the book where it shows Loni's town today and describe what you see. Okay, so we're going to be speaking not about Loni necessarily. We're going to be speaking about Loni's town. So let's see. Loni's town, is it a farm or is it a city? I would describe it more as a city. And if I was going to use a word to describe a city with all of those peoples and cars, I would say, and it is busy. Do you agree? Okay. And number 5, when does this story take place? So think about it. We did talk about the past, but is that where Loni and her grandma are? No. The story is what we're talking about now. Would you say that is the past? No. Is it the future? No. It's probably now, or we use this word, the present. The story takes place in the present. Do your answers have to look exactly like mine? No. I just want to show you what your answers could look like. I want to show you some of the thought process here. Probably the first couple times we did this in the classroom, we would do this all together. So it's even okay if you write exactly the answers that I do. I just want you to be thinking about how to make your sentences and your answers rich and not like kindergarten. All right, next page. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to read each of these sections, and then you are going to answer them with the words in the box. We have present, past, transportation, and produce. In the blank, Loni's family lives in an apartment building. In the blank, Loni's relatives lived on farms. So when do they live in an apartment building, and when did they live on a farm? Years ago, people used horses and boats for blank. They kept chickens to blank. Write a sentence that tells where you live in the present. So, you're going to pause me now. You're going to answer those questions, complete with the sentence at the bottom that tells where you live, the setting for your life story. And I'm going to pause mine so that when you come back, you'll see all the correct answers. So make sure you pause me now so that you don't catch the answers before you're done with yours. Okay, so here are the correct answers. In the present, Loni's family lives in an apartment building. In the past, Loni's relatives lived on farms. Years ago, people used horses and boats for transportation. People kept chickens to produce eggs. And here's my sentence. I live in a busy city named Benicia. All right, see you in the next video, guys.